Hello YouTube! Last Saturday I released a video where I explained to you my favorite 3 types of pull-ups to grow my lats, because I went from having shitty lats to having pretty decent lats via pull-ups only, and therefore I wanted to be sure that you guys could actually get the same gains, because I believe that pull-ups are absolutely essential to develop a complete back as a natural lifter. And because the algorithm works in mysterious ways, what ended up happening is that a ton of posts were being recommended to me in relation to pull-ups. And one in particular caught my attention because it was a post that was trying to explain in a sense that pull-ups were actually really terrible for lats. So me being innocent and naive, of course, I thought that it was a joke. I thought it was going to be sarcastic. So I was getting ready to laugh and I clicked on it. But the issue is that it wasn't a joke. It wasn't satire. It was someone who was actually being serious. And they made a long post explaining why you will never be able to grow your lats with pull-ups only. So I want to make a video on that stupidity because I'm afraid that some people are going to actually listen to that advice and end up with no gains whatsoever. Now, the type of person that shares that type of advice is always the same. It's always the same profile. It's either a guy who's really skinny with no muscles and no gains, but he has a degree in like physiotherapy, so people listen to him for some reason, or it's a really big guy who is on juice, and for some reason is going to explain to you that bench, squat, and deadlift doesn't work, and you have to train with only machines and cables to get as big as him. Sometimes they also tag team, so you'll have a small guy and a big guy, and they're going to unite together to reinvent the wheel. These are the biomechanics guru. In this case, you'll see that it was the first. It was a guy with no gains whatsoever. But it's important to point out the type of people who do this because it also highlights the domain that is being targeted. Because the people on the receiving end of the type of attack is bodybuilders. It's always about bodybuilding. It's always a guy who is going to show up and say, hey, that one lift that people have been doing for 100 years and that works just fine is actually a terrible lift, and here's why. And they always try to replace it by something else. You will have noticed that when these people come and criticize the classics, they always try to replace the classics by something that is gimmicky, so they're the first one to ever actually come up with that, fun, so it's going to be a good time, it's going to be entertaining, and easy. They always manage to find a way to swap difficulty for something else. Case in point, all of the people who say that deadlifting is dangerous, deadlifting is bad for hypertrophy, and you ask them, okay, what is the alternative for that? And they'll tell you leg curls. Okay, so you swapped the most intense exercise on earth with the beachiest one where you can literally lay on your belly and do it, and you won't be out of breath, and you'll do sets of 15. You will see that this logic is important to keep in mind because it's a key part of the process. Now, let's get into the discussion about the post that I actually saw, and I wanted to make a reaction video because I literally just saw the post and it made me so mad I wanted to make a video immediately. So, in that post, again, pull-ups are described as being terrible for lats. And funnily enough, at the start of the post, the guy goes on to explain that they're bad for lats, but they're good for real delts, traps, and brachialis. Again, it was tough for me to believe that this wasn't a joke. So in this guy's head, if you do a pull-up, you will get better gains for your arms than for your lats. You will actually grow your real delts. Do you know many people who have massive swole real delts and tell you, oh yeah bro, it's all of these pull-ups? No, you know why? Because pull-ups don't really train the real delt that much. It stretches, sure, but it's not enough to consider that work. And I'm sure that many of you guys are watching this and listening and saying, yeah, NH, I mean, what you say makes sense, and the guy is clearly a clown. Well, he's a clown, but keep in mind that that type of revolution works. Yeah, you have people who are going to buy that type of nonsense. Like, you show a noob this, and they're going to think it makes sense. Whereas for someone like you and I, who are seasoned lifters, if I tell you, hey, pull-ups are going to grow your lats, you're going to laugh in my face because you know it's not how that works. You know that for your lats to be able to grow, you have to actually hold something heavy in your hands so that the shoulders get stretched forward and the lats have to catch it. But apparently for this guy, you will get amazing traps doing pull-ups. This is the reason why, of course, if you look at people who only do pull-ups, they have traps up to their ears. It's very well known that calisthenic athletes have amazing upper traps, sorry. So again, that's the start of the nonsense. I couldn't really believe my eyes when I saw that. But what really shocked me and made me believe that I was dealing with someone who was a true idiot is the fact that they mentioned that pull-ups were bad for lats, while at the same time saying for some cases and in certain situations. So in a sense, they're attacking pull-ups but not really attacking them, meaning that they're making sure that if someone comes up with arguments, they're going to be able to back off and say, oh well, it still works the lats, but not as much as you think. I say that because you will see that this person in particular, that I'm not going to cite because it's not important or interesting, and biomechanics gurus in general tend to be dishonest. And their dishonesty is easy to see. Now, if we're going to look at the argument that I'm going to debunk, this person says that pull-ups are horrible for lat development because, apparently, they don't work since the arms aren't tight enough to the body. So according to them, because the arm is not close to the body, that's not going to work the lats. That's their first argument. To that, I answer that it's a simple question of grip. If your arms are too wide, yes, maybe you're going to have a tough time engaging the lats, but in that case, just bring the grip in. I mean, the solution is right there. On top of that, that's for pronated pull-ups. What about chin-ups? When you do chin-ups, the arms are very close to the body. That's the point. And there's a reason why many people feel their lats a ton more on chin-ups. So what about that? Why isn't that mentioned? What about neutral grip? When the arm is like this, that's close to the body, so therefore that works the lats. This argument is absolute garbage. On top of that, it doesn't take into account the fact that you can pivot and rotate the elbow to get the arm closer to the body. Yes, if you do a pull-up with your arm like this, you're going to have a tough time recruiting the lat. But if you do it like this, you're going to have an easier time. Why? Because the arm is going to get closer to the body. It's something I taught you in my previous video, where if you rotate the arm outside and you put pressure on your pinky fingers, like you're supposed to do for pull-ups, you are going to feel the lats. Apparently, this doesn't cross the mind of biomechanics gurus, because they don't understand nuances. So that first argument of the arms not being tight enough to the body is no, it's bullshit, I just proved it. Then apparently, the humerus doesn't move backward in a pull-up, so therefore it means the lats are not worked. Okay, maybe they don't move backward, but it's because gravity doesn't allow the humerus to go backward on a pull-up. Instead, it goes downwards. It's the same fucking thing. It recruits the same muscle. It's not just because you do this instead of this doesn't mean that it's a different muscle being engaged. Maybe it's different fibers, maybe it's a different intensity. But there is true stupidity in thinking that since this is a motion that is vertical and not horizontal, it won't recruit the lats. What I think happened is that this guy thinks that a pull-up is like a reverse overhead press. So, since the overhead press doesn't work the lat, I guess the pull-up doesn't work the lat. And what does the overhead press work? Well, the rear delt and the trap. So this means that the pull-up work the rear delt and the trap. I know it sounds stupid and silly and you think, well, surely no one is dumb enough to think like this, but apparently that guy does, because he doesn't understand that the movement of the humerus is based on gravity. As long as you fight against gravity to pull the body up or weight towards you, the lat is going to be worked. It took me 15 seconds to understand, even less than that. I always knew it. Why can't this guy and these guys in particular know that? The answer is because when you are trying to reinvent the wheel, you don't think, you're trying to fit your ideal. This guy started with in mind the idea, I want to prove that pull-ups are not good for lats, and therefore what does he do? He tries everything. He's throwing the entire kitchen sink at pull-ups, hoping that something is going to stick. So far, nothing has stuck. Let's look at the next one. Apparently in pull-ups, arms aren't in a neutral position, or the shoulders are in an internal rotation, which means that it's not good for working lats. Again, I have a very simple solution. You can simply force the shoulder to go in an external rotation by rotating the wrist and putting pressure on the pinky finger. Again, it's simple. Most compound movements are like this. It's the reason why whenever I hear someone debunk the squat or the bench or the deadlift, I'm thinking, man, you understand that the beauty of these lifts is that you can move the body around the bar, right? You can rearrange the body as much as you want. So most of the time, all of the criticizing you hear about these lifts is for a very specific type. In truth, what this guy is describing is he's describing an arm pull-up. So it's for all of these people who do pull up and they do it with a ton of arms, which is of course terrible. So it's the guy who is like going to be highly away from the body with the elbow, who is going to allow the rotation to be out of whack, etc., etc. In this case, I would even say that the external or internal rotation of the shoulder depends on the individual, but it's always something you can fix. You can fix it around the bar. So this is not a good critique. And then the last one, the one that made me laugh the most, is the fact that this guy said that pull-ups are not good for lats because you disengage the lat at the bottom of the range of motion. And he is correct, but he doesn't understand that you don't have to. I understand that I am sort of fighting against the grain here because it's something I've been trying to preach for years, and many people still don't get it. Going all the way down on a pull-up and going into a dead hang where the shoulders are disengaged and the lats are disengaged is a bad idea because you also disengage the lat. This guy understands it. What he doesn't understand is that it just takes cutting the range of motion short to be able to keep the lat under constant pressure and tension on the pull-ups. You don't just stop doing pull-ups because some people don't do them properly. You fix the lift and the pattern. You don't replace it altogether. You don't throw it in the garbage. But this is what this guy did, because using all of these faulty arguments that I just proved are completely idiotic, he said that instead of doing pull-ups, you should do iliac pull-downs or one-arm cable rows. All things that are very old, by the way. This is the Afflinex school of thought. Afflinex is the guy that 6 years ago started to tell people to do one-arm cable rows to get a higher activation of the lat on chin-ups and pull-ups. And of course, you always have copycats later on who try to copy it because he is the original biomechanic guru, and therefore all of the clones of him are just as stupid. The issue is that this is not going to work because all of these lifts are not going to produce the type of mass and results that you want to expect when you train your lats. And to prove that and to actually show that I'm not bullshitting here, do you know many people who have massive fucking lats and they got it doing one-arm cable rows? I have never met a natural, an elite natural with a very good physique who told me that he developed his back with all of these bullshit cable movements. Don't get me wrong, they're good movements, but you won't get a big juicy back doing cable rows. It just won't happen. And it's not because cables are bad. It's because the intensity of the lift is simply not there. Now, when you talk about intensity, there's two factors. There's internal intensity that is just related to the lift, and then there's cross intensity that is lift compared to lift. For example, which is more intense, a curl or a deadlift? A deadlift. Why? Because it involves more muscles at once. Your nervous system fires at once. Does it mean that a curl is bad? No, but it's less intense in relation to a deadlift. Now, let me ask you this. What is more intense? A weighted pull-up or one-arm cable row? A weighted pull-up for the same reason. So, which lift should you prioritize for size? Because here we're talking about apples and apples. Deadlift and curl was apple and oranges. It's not the same muscle group, but here it's the same muscle group. So, in a pyramid of priorities, the top priority should be the pull-ups. But if you believe that pull-ups are bad and you believe that type of nonsense, you're going to replace it by cable pull-downs, you're going to replace it by cable rows, and you won't see much gains. There is a pattern and a routine and a repetition I've noticed in every single pro bodybuilder workout I've ever reviewed, and that is that they replace high-intensity movement for the lats, like rows and pull-ups, by bullshit row, cable row movements. And therefore, this should also be a proof that it's a terrible advice because pro bodybuilders give terrible advice. All of these big guys who got massive and jacked with only that by doing very low weight and a ton of reps are on drugs. It simply does not work for naturals. It's okay to use a cable row to finish the lat, but certainly not to attack it or to damage it altogether. You need something more intrusive, something that is going to be more destructive. Now, the tight arm thing I already discussed, but I just want to point out that the big argument of the guy, and the thing that made me laugh, is that of course with biomechanic gurus, they always try to present big terms. They always use scientific jargon. They always use graphs, EMG data, etc. to explain to you why they're right. Because their arguments cannot stand on their own merit. Of course, they have to rely on science. So this guy was saying that because the lat wraps around the rib cage, therefore, any movement where the arm is not tied to the body will not work. That was his logic. And to that I say, what about pullovers? Pullovers are done with the arms away from the body. That's actually the point of pullovers. The arms never even come close to being tied to the body. And it's the same logic here. The gravity is behind you in a pull-up, so the lats are being stretched like they would be stretched in a pull-up. Are you going to tell me that pullovers are bad for lats? Is it going to be the next scope? I'm sure that it's possible that it's already been said because people just love to shit on the classics. But for me, I grew my lats strictly with pull-ups and pullovers because it's the only two lifts I have access to in my home gym. So what am I? Am I a magical unicorn? I respond to an exercise that apparently is shitty? Or is it maybe that these exercises that don't have tight arms are just as good, if not better, than those done with a tight arm? This is a conclusion that anyone who is sensible would come to, but the problem is that with this new science-based wave, you have a ton of people who based all of their understanding on EMG data and science, and therefore they completely ignore the real world. They ignore real-world application and empirical evidence, and that's a problem because if you tell me that pull-ups are not good for lats, it's one of two things. You're either a contrarian or you're blind because you don't see the world around you. You don't see all of the people who built their lats strictly with pull-ups. And this is when science fails. It's not that science is bad. It's that these people don't know how to use it. Biomechanics gurus make a mockery out of science. They should be shunned by the scientific community because they are completely incapable of using empirical evidence. They cherry-pick data and they manipulate the data to fit their agenda. That is simply not the way to go. If you were to actually observe the world and look at people who have big lats, you will realize one thing. Almost all, and I would even go as far to say that all natural bodybuilders who have big lats and big upper backs build them doing pull-ups, doing vertical pulls. And you can go back down to the Bronze era all the way to today. Every single YouTuber I know and watch who has big lats built them with pull-ups, not with bullshit single arm cable rows. So therefore, experience and empirical evidence dictates that pull-ups are just great for lats. It's my experience and it's a ton of people's experience. And the king argument I have for this, that's almost an argument of authority, is look at calisthenics athletes. They have, in relation to the rest of their body, some of the best lats out there. Why? Because they do a shit ton of pull-ups. You will never catch a calisthenic athlete doing a one-arm cable row. They have no use for that shit. They hang from a bar all day, every day, and they pull. And their back looks absolutely amazing, actually. They might have the best backs out of every athlete out there. That's for a simple reason, is because vertical pulls simply work. Look at climbers. Climbers don't even do resistance training, technically. They just climb. They have amazing lats. You know why? They do this constantly. They do a pull-up motion. They grab and they pull themselves up. A pull-up. You're going to go up to these guys and tell them, oh, it's not the right way. Who gives a fuck if science says it's not the right way? What matters is real life results. And that is what these people lack altogether, because the guy that I actually checked the post from is a complete DR, meaning that he had no muscle and he especially had no lats. So the answer and the question would be, why would I, someone with big lats, take advice from someone who has small lats? Because he tells me that it's based on science and he has all of these scientific terms that only manages to work on fools and people who are easily impressed. I am personally not easily impressed, and therefore I'm not going to be fooled. And the thing that cracked me up as well is that you could tell that the guy was real mad because he had a specific post, a specific message where he said, no one cares how many pull-ups you can do. The lighter and smaller you are, the easier they get. Can you smell someone who is shit at pull-ups and got humiliated once by someone who did like 20 or 25 easily and he's decided that pull-ups were bad? Like, this is typically someone whose ego got shattered at some point and therefore has decided that pull-ups are the devil. You know, I often talk about strength copers, all of these people who are fat fucks and who hate on aesthetics because they couldn't get big and magnificent themselves. In this case, we're dealing with a size copper. We're dealing with someone who's the opposite, who clearly wants strength, wants the ability to rep out pull-ups, lacks it because he sucks, he doesn't train them, and therefore came up with an excuse. But this is dangerous because this guy is followed by a ton of youngins who are going to just take what he says at face value because it's scientifically based, and that's a problem. I also love the lighter and smaller you are, the easier they get, as of course a very vicious way to put down calisthenics athletes and saying that what they do doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day they don't train legs, they're not really big, so they can do 50 pull-ups and it just doesn't count. It still counts, it's based on what they prefer, and it still builds a pretty fucking juicy back. Also, this guy has no legs to stand on, because from all of the videos I saw of him, he was small. He was much smaller than all of the calisthenic athletes I know. So what does he know? Well, he knows nothing. And that is because he is what we call in French un zététicien. Actually, there's a big drama going on in France between les zététiciens, which are pretty much people who are science-based, and people who are evidence-based or experience-based. And you know, I intermix the two because in my opinion, experience is evidence. And people who base all of their work on EMG data are not evidence-based, because that's empty and void evidence. We're going to get back to that in another video if one day I decide to just tackle the entire science-based YouTube fitness, which will occur eventually because I'm going to get tired of these little muskrats who share this shitty fucking advice. But in this case, it's the same thing. It's dudes who are small and who thought, okay, I can't impress people with my physique, and people are not going to take my word for advice if they just base it on what I managed to build with my lifting methods. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to get a bullshit degree, or I'm going to call myself science-based, and therefore I'm going to have a pass, I'm going to get some social proof. The issue is that for the most part, these people are not pure. So be very careful. It's the same with a lot of biomechanics gurus. What they want is, they want to be able to have their place in the sun, and they'll find any way they can to get there. And you can see that because they're dishonest. As I said at the start, the guy clearly made everything he could in his power to put down pull-ups without really getting involved. Meaning that even if for some reason he saw this video, he would be able to back off and say, no, it's not really what I said, or, well, I did say that pull-ups could work. And actually, he actually had a post where he said, only genetically gifted people grow their lats with pull-ups. This is what is known as a built-in excuse. That way, if someone like me builds their lats with only pull-ups, he can say, oh, it's because you're special. This is how you use Schrodinger's genetics as a weapon, because you can always find a way to say, well, your method only worked for you, but my method will work for most people. I guarantee you that if almost all individuals did weighted pull-ups, they would see massive growth. This guy will tell you otherwise. And what I ask is, who do you want to believe? Do you want to believe the classics, or do you want to believe just another biomechanics guru who is trying to reinvent the wheel? Because keep in mind one thing, this will not stop. These people will come after every single orthodox lift, every single lift that has been time tested to build strong and big muscles, and are going to destroy them all. Your squats, your deadlifts, your bench, your rows, your curls, everything. These people will leave nothing untouched. They are like a swarm of locusts. They devour everything they can. And the issue is that they leave the land afterwards totally scorched, because I can tell you one thing. A generation of people who follow that type of advice is going to be a generation of small lifters. You will not build big muscles with all of that garbage isolation cable shit. You have to lift heavy shit with compound movements that people have been doing forever. It's the way our ancestors from the Bronze Era have done it, and it's the way we should do it ourselves. The will is being perfected with time, but we pretty much understand how it works. It's round and it goes forth. These guys are trying to tell you that a rectangular shape is better for a wheel. Would you believe that? Do you want to jump in dark cars? Because I can tell you they're not going to go very far, it's going to break down. But that's what they want you to do. What I want you to do is to just ignore that type of nonsensical advice, stick to pull-ups, grow some heavy fucking lats, and whenever one of these idiots tell you, pull-ups are not good for lats, you grab them, you jump off a cliff, then you expand your lats and you fly off and you just let them go. You let them go like a turd for them to crash on the floor, and then you fly to the gym, you do a set of pull-ups, drink some protein shake, go home, make gains. This is the way to eradicate the locusts, and I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.